Welcome to the Insiders Insight podcast, where we share with you the thoughts of the individuals who are working for projects that are changing the world. Welcome to Insiders Insight. Today I have Adam from Music. Today we're going to be discussing the impact blockchain is going to have on the music industry. But before we move on to that conversation, Adam, why don't you share with our audience your journey into crypto and how you started Music?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess in some ways you could say that my journey into crypto started back in 2007. And that's when I was a student. I was doing music tech, and the lady from the intellectual property office came in and she said, "Hey, you want to protect your copyright? What you've got to do is get a CD of the recording that you've made, the piece of music, put it in an envelope, post it to yourself, and the record of the postal service having recorded the delivery, it acts as an immutable record that validates that you've created this piece of intellectual property and you can protect your IP." So even at the time, which was 2007, and I think that they were already starting to phase out CD drives, I thought this sounded completely ridiculous. And then it was actually 10 years later that I was at the Ethereum meetup. I think it was the first Ethereum meetup in Shenzhen, and Vitalik was present and introducing the project. And as soon as he started talking about blockchain, I realized that there was this amazing opportunity for digital rights management in music, and the fact that there's an immutable record of the point of the time of creation, and a timestamp that didn't require a centralized authority. It immediately seemed obvious to me that this solved the big problem of IP and being able to register our IP and not rely on a centralized intermediary. And then, from there, that's when I started getting into actually getting hold of some crypto. I got hold of some ETH at the time, and I went into, I think I only invested in one ICO. It was kind of during like the ICO mania, and promptly forgot all about it. And then it was like back at the beginning of, I think, 2018, checked back in, and those, I had loads of tokens. So it was, that was kind of my introduction to crypto. And at the time, I just wanted to see that it was real. So I just cashed out and made a nice little like 50x return or whatever. And really was from there kind of got into prototyping a NFT concept for digital rights management for music. And that was set up on Ropsten, and was completed in 2018. And basically the idea was that individual loops could be, any individual loop in a piece of music has value, and that can be shared inside an ecosystem, like between different participants, be it professional producers or anyone that wants to create a remix of a song. But actually at the time in 2018, there wasn't so much interest. I think everyone was talking about enterprise blockchain, and there weren't so many opportunities for user-facing applications, and it was difficult to kind of drum up interest in the project. So at that time, I parked this concept and actually kind of have only really got back into crypto and blockchain and DeFi and this amazing world at the beginning of this year.
Wow. What were you doing in that meantime? Well, what were you doing straight after university? I think you told me earlier that you were a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I've been doing like basically music tech, entrepreneurship for my entire career. So after I graduated, I'd actually started this project at uni, which is basically a new electronic musical instrument, and was kind of I commercialized that, and then that eventually brought me over to China, where I was basically to focus on the kind of manufacturing side of things and like benefiting from the kind of supply chain over in China. And then subsequently ended up with a licensing deal. So I licensed the design to a company in Hong Kong, basically like a toy company, and that was set up as a kid's, basically to sell it as a musical learning toy, right? For the Chinese market. So and that was 2017 when I kind of came out of that project, and that was when really like I first got introduced into crypto.
Wow. So this project, music, has been on your mind for a long time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, like, really, like the roots for music, although, like, of course, there was that moment, you know, when I was just still a student, that was an important, you know, that was an important part of the journey. But I think that the idea started to properly crystallize in, I think it was maybe 2012. And that was really thinking about a kind of hybrid, audio encoding format, that could be encrypted and could, you know, enable, fans and creators to have closer connections. And coming out of the wave of, we were just seeing the emergence of streaming at that time and some indication that the music industry could return to growth. But the idea for music at that point was more about a kind of gamified musical interactive experience, and there was definitely some interest for that. And that was basically, you know, kind of really what I was focusing on before kind of going deep into the DeFi side of things at the beginning of this year. So prior to 2021, I had been working on like a mixing, basically like a mixing technology, like an AI DJ for mixing music. And though we had some traction with this project, and it was set up as an app, and we were able to build a user base in largely in India and the Philippines, and also Brazil. It kind of we were basically just like reaching kind of super like really young kids, so lots of kids who are about even as young as 6, if you could believe it, and they really enjoyed using this app. But it was actually kind of difficult to monetize, and also it was difficult to get the licenses sorted out from the music industry. So I think I was speaking with Matt Black, he's the owner of Ninja Tune. It's a record label out of the UK that is, you know, responsible for acts like Bonobo, and I think they've got Peggy Goo on the label now, and also like the Cinematic Orchestra. And he said, "Hey, Adam, you should really look into NFTs." And that was the point when I just kind of realized what had been going on in the NFT space, and I'd seen some evidence of this on YouTube and everything. But that was the time when I dusted off the research that I had been doing back in 2018 into the multi-channel audio solution for which utilized NFTs.
Okay, wow, that is really interesting. Where do you think the music industry is going to go from here? I think that NFTs have basically opened up such a large amount of opportunities, and where do you think NFTs are going to impact the most in terms of the music industry?
Yeah, well, interesting question. So I would say that we haven't yet seen a true project that has harnessed everything that NFTs can offer to music. There's been some attempts, right? And we've seen some interesting ideas, but I think that, say, one of the barriers to entry is adoption. So one of the things that, for example, like the system that I outlined at the beginning, which incorporates DRM, as in digital rights management, to pull that off is just, there's not enough. I think there's not enough users in the space or there certainly weren't enough users in the space in 2018 to make it viable. And also, I guess it's not, I think there isn't enough, knowledge, or there hasn't been enough knowledge in the industry to be able to integrate that into existing products and services. So like music production software, like, say, Ableton Live or Reason or Logic Pro would be the perfect company companies or the softwares that could integrate this kind of technology that could be served up from a blockchain. So but I do believe that the end game for really like, you know, the music industry and NFTs is content delivery, right? So I think that, I mean, although that there's an adoption issue, I think we're also now we're just starting to see blockchains that are like, you know, super fast, and I think that's a great demonstration of what the possibilities are. But we haven't seen the you know, like we're not seeing I think most of the applications that we're seeing now, and I think this is really exciting, is on the DeFi side, right, rather than this kind of content infrastructure side. And though there have been attempts by, you know, various blockchain, you know, in like specific layer ones for content delivery, for example, even like going way back, there's been a couple of projects that never really took off properly. But I you know, the end game for music, and I'm trying to kind of you know, kind of articulate this as clearly as I can, but I believe that the end game for music is a full suite content delivery system, like which is backed up by a blockchain or a series of blockchains, you know, whether it's a layer 1 or a layer 2, or it's between, you know, multiple different chains that are interoperable, and for basically the intellectual property, the metadata that records like who created the track, you know, what the royalty split is between the different the different creators, right? So, you know, the instrumentalists, the singer, the songwriter, if somebody financed that, you know, to the recording, right, then they would potentially be entitled to a cut. And for all of that to be also like modifiable and upgradable. And what that means is full transparency, right? So, and that's what the music industry sorely lacks, full transparency. So we don't have an example of, and in fact, you know, I work with teams that deal with music data, and really like it almost, when you look at like music royalty data, it almost looks like there's some like deliberate obfuscation, which is, you know, that's advantageous to the incumbents, right? So it's easier to collect the income on behalf of the artists. And if they're not able to read the documentation about their financials, then they're never gonna be able to like even really complain, right? So I think that's also a big challenge to being able to fully implement something like this. Is, you know, of course the incumbents are terrified, and it would not be advantageous to the kind of intermediaries in the music industry to enable something like this to exist.
Could I just get you to explain how music will work? I have an understanding or an idea, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So music will allow you to turn your track into an NFT. And then when it is an NFT, there'll be some sort of protocol or smart contract in place where then you can earn a return each time someone uses that NFT, and you as the creator of the NFT then has the right to basically sell the rights to that return to another person, or keep it all to themselves, or is that how it works? Like, what's the full image of how music will work? Because everything you've explained is very interesting, and I want to know what part music will play in that ecosystem.
Yeah, totally. So, well, and also I guess, you know, what I've been talking about so far is kind of like, this is the way I see the industry going. And I think it's inevitable that we'll see this kind of content delivery system and all of that. And I see that as the end game. But right now, specifically, we've kind of boiled everything down to, if you really look at like, what is the market now? What's going on in the market? What's going on in DeFi? What's happening in NFTs? What's required in the short term, right? So music is solving the financial issue. So right now, record labels aren't issuing advances. I mean, ironically, they do issue, you know, they do provide capital if you've already already made it, and that's more like they're kind of buying the right to you as an artist to be on the label and your music. But for for independent artists and those kind of up and coming artists that need to define their careers, there's really nothing from a record label anymore. There's no investment in that space. It's all gone. So Music enables artists to claim their future streaming income by issuing an NFT bond. So back in the 90s, David Bowie issued his own bond. He wrapped up like 25 of his albums into what has become known as the Bowie bonds, and he sold that to Prudential Insurance, and this enabled Bowie to buy back his rights from his former manager. So basically, we're doing something like that, but rather than Bowie needing to team up with a bank, or rather than the artist even needing to team up with a bank, they can utilize the Music protocol in order to issue their own NFT bonds. And then we have implemented a rating engine, which is inspired by the work of agencies like Moody's, Standard & Poor's or Fitch's, in order to give the bond a rating based on the artist popularity, but also in the collateral that they've provided in order to mint the bond. So it's it's really about the financial side of things, rather than this full kind of content delivery vision that I outlined. And that's just because the artists really they really need this financing, and at the moment it's just not there. So equally, this can be employed by institutional rights owners. So it can be employed by estates, and as in like the estates who are the rights owners of Legacy Catalog, for example, or by the private equity funds that have been buying up rights left, right, and centre. So our goal is to make these tools just as accessible for independent artists who could be emerging out of any part of the world and have a track record of streaming and have a fan base, to the biggest stars and in the world, and some of the biggest music owners in the world.
Will the bonds be fractionalized? Will the bonds be fractionalized, or how does the initial liquidity get released?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, they can be so the way that we've set it up, and we've actually just come out of the we're pretty early stage. We just built out this demo for the Chainlink full hackathon, and it was just announced that we won the grand prize, by the way, which was is kind of amazing. Was a really fantastic validation from Chainlink and from the industry. But so what happens is the bonds are the way that we've done it, rather than the being kind of like fully fractionalized as like on the kind of technical. So you've got one NFT that's fractionalized. We're issuing them as multiple, or they can be issued as multiple NFTs. So that means that basically they can be, if they were to be surfaced on a platform like OpenSea, for example, then they'll appear as a collection, right? So that's just a kind of practical decision that we made along the way. So basically, you're actually minting. So for now, individual NFTs are being issued, but they're all part of the same contract. They can all be viewed as part of the same collection, and in order to get a face value, the artist or the rights owner needs to provide a quarter's worth of streaming income equivalent as collateral, right? So the idea is that say you've got a term of 5 years, for example, then and you issue you want to issue a bond, for 20k, then if you provide collateral for $1,000 for the quarter, then that would enable that.
How do you verify the streaming royalties?
So at the moment, it's less focused on verifying the specific royalties, as it's more about like, you know, what the artist. It's more about like the streaming income, right? I mean, sorry, it's more about the streaming numbers in terms of like the number of streams and the number of listeners. And in order for the artist to mint, they need to verify through their Spotify for Artists account. So that gives the protocol access to their data from Spotify, like the latest streaming numbers, which are basically, you know, that means that they can get a rating that's proportional to, from the number of streams, it's proportional to their, you know, to the value of the bonds that they want to issue. Right. So yeah. So if you've got a Spotify for Artists account, then you can get verified and you can issue your own bonds. And then by adding music to the team on your Spotify for Artists account, then you're able to issue your own NFT bonds. And what we're doing now, the work we're doing with Chainlink, is setting up a decentralized Oracle network. So that means actually bringing real music data from streaming services such as Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, but also YouTube and Instagram and TikTok that are really influential on the popularity of an artist, and bringing all of these Web 2 data, all of this data that's being collected into a decentralized Oracle network, meaning that, you know, we're not going to be there's not going to be a single point of failure, and we'll be able to serve up, rather than just serving up pricing data, right, which is the majority of the data feeds that are running into smart contracts right now. They're all pricing data, right? I mean, I think there's some weather data and things like that as well, which is useful for the kind of parametric insurance and all of those applications. But actually bringing in the really important streaming data, so that the rating engine itself can continue to be improved based on the popularity of an artist. So the idea being that, you know, if you've just released a track, it's gone viral on TikTok, then our engine will, you know, get an indication that the bond is going to be, you know, it's going to qualify for a different grade, potentially like a different rating. If you see what I'm saying. So that's kind of, we've just started off with this Spotify for Artists data, but actually, you know, a lot of that stuff you'll see on the streaming services. You're able to see like the number of listeners a specific artist or a specific track has. So all of that can now be fed into, can now be fed into smart contracts in order for us to have this data, and for the rating engine to respond accordingly.
Is the ratings decentralized?
Yeah, so I mean, we've currently so there's a few components of the rating engine itself, right? And there's a current, like, the first iteration is just it's basically just coming up with it's the median of Spotify listeners and YouTube subscribers. So and it was just, you know, I mean, basically, like, I just came up with some numbers and a couple of different ratings that, you know, similarly there's still like a AAA and an A grade ratings, but then everything underneath that, rather than going through like the traditional alphabet, the letters are based on like the Sanskrit vowel alphabet, just to kind of differentiate it from, you know, and so we don't get confused with being like just trying to copy the specific rating agencies. So that's not, you know, I mean, currently it's just the starting point. Like we've got these different data sources from these centralized data providers, but so we're working on decentralizing the data feeds themselves with Chainlink, and it's not to say that, you know, I mean, if there's a discrepancy with the data that's being released by, say, Spotify or YouTube or whatever, there's nothing, you know, we can't that we can't affect that, right? But you know, we'll also be, of course, like pulling in data from Audius, for example, which is obviously all like, you know, publicly verifiable and on the blockchain. But the idea of bringing in the data feeds from the centralized data providers or the kind of legacy streaming services is that, they're basically that is a standard. And although we don't have access to the infrastructure like that creates those numbers, and we can't see, that's not decentralized, right? But if by having multiple data providers that are pulling that data, so which currently exist, right? There are several APIs that are aggregating music data and providing this all into, like they'll have like a trial, right? Or they'll have a paid service. So you can, if you're a manager, you'll be able to get an idea about the popularity of your artist from all of these different data sources. So by bringing these data providers in, then we're able to get a decentralized network so that we can at least be sure that, on aggregate, the data is clean. If there's an issue with one of them, we're not going to have to deal with a single point of failure. And also, we can verify if there's some discrepancy between like what the data that is being spat out by one API versus another, right? So, of course, like we're not aiming, and we cannot, like with this project, like fix, issues like if you try to game the numbers or if there's some foul play. I think there were some reports of foul play, for example, from Tidal. But generally speaking, these centralized services, they're providing numbers that are, it's unlikely that you see these gamed in a really major way, as they're setting up kind of algorithms to protect the veracity of this data, right? And then the other side of the rating engine is we're setting up a DAO around the rating engine itself, but it's also around the music currency, and the point of the DAO is to invite contribution from the community, so that we can advance rather than it's an automatic rating that's just based. There's a smart contract. It can verify the number of streams you've got. It can verify the collateral that you've deposited in the collateral pool. But it's not like an individual's opinion, right? It's just a contract. So, and it's just a starting point. And so the idea of the DAO is, inviting contribution from stakeholders in the music industry, inviting contribution from financial practitioners, from even, from TradFi, and into DeFi, and inviting contribution from fans as well, and the people that are going to be buying these bonds. So it's, although like, you could say we could say, yeah, it's decentralized because it's a smart contract that's like automatically computing the rating, but it's actually it was just an idea from a single person, right? So in order to see it like truly decentralized, we need to invite the community to kind of have input and refine it, right? And similarly on the data front, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to build out this network. But what we do have is the concordance of Chainlink, right? Which is awesome because they're responsible for like the vast amount of Oracle feeds in DeFi.
On the final part that I would like you to discuss about, how do the bond holders get paid? Because obviously the royalties for the tracks are going to be paid in fiat. Well, then do the bond holders get paid, or do they? How will that work?
Yeah, that's right. So what we're setting up is the basically enabling the artists to reassign their revenue at the distributor level to the NFT. So this means that, like, just so you understand, like, say you've got your music on Spotify, you're getting lots of listens, you're receiving whatever, like a few $1,000s a quarter, for example. That money doesn't come directly from the streaming service. That money is paid because the streaming services are dealing with like thousands, tens of thousands, millions of artists. So the streaming services pay that to a distributor or to a label, right? Within the legacy model, and there are still big acts that are on labels, right? So basically, like, the artist can reassign that income or a portion of that income at the distributor level to the smart contract, and then that's paid directly directly into either an on-ramp, which goes straight to the NFT, or if the distributor is forward-thinking enough, then they can actually pay the income in crypto.
Wow. So really, this part you also need to be developing. It's kind of like the logistics part of the whole project.
Yeah, we used to call this like, we had a diagram, there's a diagram of this. We used to call this bit the grey box, right? And that's basically just because we didn't know how the hell we were gonna do it. But it's since become kind of apparent, that that there is a solution. And what we're seeing now is, and you may have seen that. So DistroKid is they are like a music distributor. It's basically Spotify, right? So I don't think they're 100% owned by Spotify, but I believe it may even be a majority ownership stake by Spotify. DistroKid released their own NFT collection about 2 weeks ago. So you are seeing these music distributors. I mean, the difference between now and 2018, right, when I was working on these NFTs, is that everybody wants to play this game now, right? The entire music industry is looking at NFTs and has recognized the opportunity. So really, in order to onboard, I guess really like the work that's cut out for us in 2022 is to onboard. We're not going to onboard Sony, right? Not next year. We're not going to onboard the major labels. It's unlikely. But these other periphery players, such as distributors, such as data providers, all of these players can join in with crypto, and this is going to be the beginning of the transformation and bringing music data and music revenue on chain so that we can all benefit.
It's an amazing idea. Now that you've explained it all, because previously I only had a really vague idea of what you were doing, but now that you've explained it, it's revolutionary, I think. I think you could really change the whole landscape of the music industry with music.
Yeah, well, that's the goal, and that's the mission, really, because, I came from a background when I think, when I graduated in 2009, just after the financial crisis, there really wasn't an opportunity. I mean, getting into making music at that time, you're talking about, you're coming into a world in recession, but also the revenues of music have been completely cannibalized. So 2009 was probably, it's one of the it was a real low for music revenue. So there's just so much music that hasn't been able to have been made just because there's not, there just weren't the financial opportunities that we're starting to see emerging right now. I think a lot of people criticize streaming because they feel like it's not paying enough, but it's actually it's not that. I mean, it's actually the legacy model of music and the intermediaries that are taking away a lot of the revenue, rather than the streaming services themselves that are actually kind of struggling with really competitive economics, and it has been something of a race to the bottom. But at the same time, I've got friends who run independent labels, for example, and they've been doing really well out of streaming, and it is something. The music industry is growing now. We are in growth, and these assets are uncorrelated from the boom and bust cycles of the market, both crypto and the real world. So there's a massive opportunity for anyone in the crypto space, and including fans, to jump in and benefit from this moment in history, right?
Perfect, Adam. Thank you so much for sharing. Before we finish the podcast, I have a question from the audience for you, which is, in the next year or two, what do you think is going to be the next big wave in crypto? So we had DeFi, we had NFTs, we now are going through the gaming metaverse. What do you think is going to be the next one?
Yeah, well, interesting question. And I guess it would be good to think about, take it away from music a bit. But so I mean, I think, I think what's been really exciting is seeing this stuff that's been happening with DeFi 2.0 and seeing these rebasing currencies and all of this. I think that's really exciting. But I guess, in my experience and what's going on now, I mean, really, like the next big wave is it must be the like establishment of like a proper like regulatory infrastructure, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if we can play it right, and I say by we I mean the crypto community. So I think that I have been dealing more and more with regulators or people that deal with regulators, and I think that like crypto going mainstream properly and integrating with the legacy financial system isn't as bad as I feel like some people. I think there is a lot of fear about the regulatory side, but really, like, it's kind of, I mean, this view might be controversial, but it is, I think, for us to have an established regulatory infrastructure, so we at least know what the rules are, that's going to enable so much innovation, and if we get it right and the lobbying clout of the crypto industry is able to, if we're able to set our own terms, then I think that there is the capacity for innovation on the level, like, such as which you only see once in a generation, right? And if you look at what happened in Silicon Valley in the first place, and the emergence of computers, right? There were a unique set of circumstances, and part of that was the concordance of coming from the concordance of government. So although you hear a lot of regulators like talking up the game, I do have hope that like a regulatory infrastructure is just gonna enable the enable innovation rather than take away from it. And so I kind of see that as that's just such an important part of this process now. And I really have been sick of everybody's like worried about what the SEC is going to say or they're going to do, especially when it comes to our project, right? Like, people are saying it's a security, blah, 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 you got to wait. But at the same time, like, we're just going to have to roll ahead with this. And, we have to establish this project in the marketplace. There's so much demand. So, I do believe that like with considered dialogue and like, real, mature interaction with regulators, the industry isn't going to be stamped out of existence, right? So I'm hopeful on that front, and maybe that wasn't the kind of answer that you were looking for, but I'm definitely I'm bullish on the industry as a whole and on the regulators not kind of messing it up, and recognizing the benefits of the innovation that are coming out of this space.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast, Adam. If you want to give a shout out to any socials or any websites you want people to visit, please do so.
Yeah, sure. So you can check us out on Newsic.fm, and we're on Twitter, Newsic_protocol.
All of those will be in the show notes below. Thank you so much, Adam, for being part of the podcast, and we will see you all next episode. Bye, guys.
Cheers. Yeah, my pleasure.